Hello, good morning. This is video log entry 1:30 and currently is about 10:30 a.m. CST. I think daylight savings was today, so I got an extra hour of sleep and I felt pretty good. I was like, oh, it's 9, but I feel like I had more rest and sleep at 9. But obviously, since I had an extra hour, it's basically me getting up at 10 and all that. So I was like, whoa, I have a lot more energy than I am accustomed to. Actually, I didn't even have to drink coffee, but I still drink it because I just like the taste of coffee. I'm thinking about maybe going decaf because I kind of want to rely on my natural circadian rhythm as opposed to just pumping myself up with caffeine and then crashing in the afternoon. So that's like another thing I want to do. I have been doing my typical research, but I did a little bit of research past my curiosities around spin and all that, and how you can actually formulate spin from a wave point of view through the Feynman path integral formulation. But I don't know, this is just my intuition speaking. I haven't properly rigorously, quote unquote rigorously, of course, rigorously for physics, I guess would be the better way to say it, because if a mathematician comes by and sees this, they may say that's not rigorous at all. But yeah, anyways, rigorously for physics, I haven't properly use the path integral because again, I can't even say really know what the intuitively know what a Feynman path integral is. I know that the path integral kind of, well, I'm not even sure. I think of it like this. There are multiple. I think of it as multiple world lines, and we can look at a simple system where there's an electron suspended in space. But due to the fact that it has wave nature properties, you can think of it as a frame rate. I like kind of think of things from a computer standpoint, and of course we can actually kind of simulate this world as a computer and model it that way, and just from the perspective of a computer. So from my understanding is that you have all these world lines, and they all have the same frame rate, of course, and these world lines exist just because of the fact of the wave nature of a particle, right? So the wave moving. Another thing is, I was thinking, right, they were talking about this kind of stuff, and when you think about vacuums, it's not interacting with anything, and nothing is seeing it per se, right? So why does it choose a particular direction is another thing I was thinking about. I was like, so each frame rate it's collapsing and then becoming a wave again and collapsing, becoming a wave, because it doesn't have. Well, maybe not. No, sorry. No, that's wrong of me to say. Sorry. Just because, you can think of a particle moving in space, and then these waves obviously represent a probability in which they will be in the given direction. So, like if you think that's another thing is like it's permeating all throughout space. So you do have to take the Feynman line integral or path integral to come up with a probability of it being in a particular place or something like that, or for it to go down this world line. There's a probability for a certain world line maybe. So when you think of a particle going straight, or the wave going straight, the highest probability is going to be that world line is going to be going straight. But due to the fact that if it's wave nature, it can actually go other directions. It can, since it's dispersed all throughout space, its information and its probability of being, there's actually a probability of it being out in not out in infinity, again, I don't like to talk about infinity, but there's a probability of it actually. But then you also have to think about the tension factor and everything, but it takes a while before you can actually say that, well, actually once you take time out of it, from the perspective of just being, that gets a little bit iffy. I don't want to talk about that, but there's a probability of it. It can be anywhere in space once you take out time, or the tension factor. The tension factor, I was thinking about, so time is very interesting, and the species of causality is actually time. Doesn't time essentially, from what I can see, time is seen as cause and effect. Obviously, that's the reason why we see time. It's like a frame rate again, just a state and then moving through space and all that. But then you can leave it as a standard cause and effect thing going on and whatnot. And I tend to philosophize a lot of things, but yeah, it seems like I guess a better way to explain time is that it's just an emergent factor of cause and effect. Emergent factor of cause and effect. Yeah, and that there's a speed of causality as well, and time is dependent on that for certain states, and that's why we add attention factor, because we humans like to we humans need that for our brains to understand. Because I mean, if there were attention factor, if you think about there not being attention factor in a wave, or sorry, a field, that means information travels instantaneously. That would be non-local, right? But non-locality actually does exist, just because of the fact that there are dimensions outside of us that we can't perceive with time. And then, yeah, sure, you can actually, the interesting thing is, like, we can add dimensions to time just for us to look at the dynamics of a system, but, you know, without it, it tends to not have a structure, I guess. And that's why quantum entanglement exists, because, again, quote-unquote, there are dimensions that we can't see. And there's no time associated with those dimensions because we can't perceive it. Of course, you know, maybe there is a being in that world that is seeing it for what it is. You can imagine another world. And there happens to be, let's say, these quantum, you know, electrons are kind of connected to each other through a ley line in this world, and the information is going through the field. Per se, you could just think of it as a ley line. You could think of it as anything, really. I mean, path of least action. So maybe that would I don't know how the worlds work. And maybe you can model these worlds through field as well. And yeah. So I mean, like through the perspective of the being in that world that has these ley lines connected to these electrons, they see it as they see it as well, it takes time to go here, but from our perspective it's non-local because we can't perceive their world and they can't perceive ours. So then yeah, it's kind of interesting to think of it like that from a perspective. I think that's another thing to think about, is like multiple worlds and how these worlds are actually, due to non-locality, they're instantaneous. They just, yeah, because we're not perceiving it. Obviously these are systems we can't perceive except for the actual observers in those worlds and whatnot. And yeah, so I like using, I don't know, ley lines are cool. I think it's because I played a lot of Killers 2, and they had like these ley lines that you can fly through with your glider and everything, and I just always found that as fun. It took me a while to get that because I tend to procrastinate in games and whatnot, and I kind of do my own thing. I really don't like going by the book, it seems. Like most MMOs, you know, I like Guild Wars 2 because you don't have to go by the book in Guild Wars 2. I would not. I probably wouldn't. Like, I tried playing WoW. I actually kind of enjoyed WoW, but I would play at my own pace because, again, I like meandering, and I kind of like reading the dialogue and just having fun. I'm not the kind of person who rushes through video games. My brother is, though. He rushes through everything. I'm more of a meanderer, which is why I didn't like education much, because it's kind of like the same structure. Just rushing through the material as fast as possible, and then just calling it a, and that's great, you know. There are a lot of people like that, and I just happen to be very laid back, and that's fine. And I used to think that my personality trait of being laid back kind of tied into my intelligence, but I realized it wasn't that. It just happens to be something that I have. I just like taking my time, and I like just think about things deeply. I like thinking about things deeply. And it's hard to, you can do that on your off time in school, but it's a balance, right? It's a balance like anything else. And I would let my why thoughts kind of crowd my head as opposed to just listening to the curriculum, unfortunately, because I consider myself to have quite an imagination, more than average. I was always an escapist in this world. I didn't like the reality that we lived in, so I guess I found ways to create my own worlds in my own head, and that's why I read fiction a lot. And so I play video games with a very intricate world, I guess, and big worlds. I do like that. I love fiction. I love being able to escape from this world. But yeah, I guess to some degree, trying to understand ways in which we can perceive reality is another way of me trying to escape from this world to a degree. Yeah. So, what was I talking about? Oh yeah, I was talking about the Feynman path integral. Or just, it's called the path integral. It was developed by Feynman when he was kind of looking at quantum electrodynamics, which is what I'm doing now, because I think quantum electrodynamics is the best way to kind of ease yourself into quantum field theory, because quantum electrodynamics happens to be a very easy, not easy system. It can get complicated really quickly, of course, but it's easy to think about the perception of the electron and its dynamics in these fields and whatnot, and then it kind of creates a foundation of intuition for the mind. And I also found, well, I have two books I'm looking at. I'm looking at classical field theory, and I'm looking at, what's it called? Quantum field effect? What is it called? God, what is the book called? Oh, effective field theory. Effective field theory. Effective field theory doesn't have a lot of reviews, but it has 5 stars from 8 people. When was this released? Oh, it's actually a pretty new book, January 21st, 2021, so yeah, about 3 years ago. But I am looking at these 2 books. One, I think I'm going to look at classical field theory first, but the thing is with classical field theory is that it doesn't really give a lot of perspectives of like how it's like it's just its mathematical foundations and all that. And, effective field theory is the other way around. It's kind of looking at the applications of fields and whatnot, different places and subjects, primarily around. I think thermodynamics was one of the first places that people started applying fields. I mean, of course, you can think about Maxwell, because he started applying fields to electrodynamics. But there was Boltzmann, I think. Boltzmann happened to be not the Boltzmann constant. Boltzmann was probably before Maxwell, around the same time as Maxwell. So yeah, so they were the first to really. I think they were the first. Maybe they were. I'm talking about like field theory from like a wave point of view, not like the vector point of view. Because when you think about the vector point of view, you start thinking about particles again. Yeah, so of course you had the mechanical wave, which is what Maxwell was looking at, and Boltzmann actually, I think effective field theory is kind of looking at the vector point of view. Of course, you can still use vectors for waves, because you can then look at the highest peak of that particular wave to say that's the particle, or whatever you want to call it. But sure, we can say it like that. But so Boltzmann happened to have, well, he was studying about thermodynamics, a very interesting field, and he developed statistical mechanics. And statistical mechanics is used mainly because we happen to be dealing with complex systems again, and these complex systems probably better to kind of devise from a probabilistic point of view. I think that's probably the reason why. I think. Don't quote me on that. So he developed entropy, and he realized that entropy can be mapped with k times, I think it's a logarithm. Logarithms are the inverse of exponentials, of course, and basically logarithms are kind of saying like how many times you have to power something to reach a certain number, and then as an input, of course. I think that's how you see it as, because you input a number, and then that number could be the number of potential states, I think. Number of states, probably, because the number of states says that it's asking like how many times you have to branch out, depending on the kind of logarithm. If you look at like computer science, we look at log base 2, right? Log base 2 is basically, so I mean, of course there are it depends on how many branch states there are. So like you think of like an event, and there could be two events going on there. So that's why we think about that. Computer science is based on 2 states, and then being able to map out all possible states with 2 states, basically. It's just how computer science works, because we think about computers through on and off, right? 2 states. You start at one state, 0, 1, and then each other state tends to trickle out and create a whole state from 2 states. And, there's potentially a way in which you could do that with the universe as well. But I don't want to think about that. But yeah, so that's why logarithms are involved. Basically, you're looking at a number of states and how many times you have to multiply it based on. You're looking at a number of states, and you're you're looking at the base state of that branches off from that. So you have there are other states in which these states can trickle from a node or God. Maybe you could even think of it like that, God or a node or whatever. But let's not talk about that. Yeah, so that's why logarithms are used, essentially. And that's why you have like an omega. And there's obviously entropy, and entropy is seen as information, a number of states that you can possibly have. So, of course, when you think about, is that really seen it that way? The number of states, and how these numbers, how many states tend to make chaos to some degree. And don't ask me why. This is, I don't know. I haven't really studied much about thermodynamics and entropy and all that, and how they tie into information. But from my understanding, that's how I see it, because that is how entropy is derived. I think it's a capital S for entropy. And K sub B is, of course, it's Boltzmann constant. They had to put the B at the bottom, and the logarithm doesn't have to have a base. I don't think so. Now I'm curious. Okay, so it says log on there, but there's no base, which is understandable because you'd want it to. It depends on the system that you're looking at and all that. I think the good ways to look at it is like you could think of it like as an automaton, or again you can look at it from a computer science perspective and look at it as an on or off state, or and then I guess you can look at it from the beginning of the world and all that, and that's something I don't want to really wrap my head around right now and whatnot. And you can actually, I guess maybe there is a way. It's no, thank you. No, thank you. Yeah, I mean that's something for me to think about, and maybe I'll implement that in my reading. But yeah, so yeah, that's cool and all. Why was I talking about that again? Why was I talking about that? I actually have no idea why I'm talking about Boltzmann right now. I'm gonna look back at this video and wonder why I was talking. Oh yeah, because I was talking about effective field theory. Yeah, so basically I was just talking about effective field theory and why everything can just be simulated as fields, and because, well, our human brains that we have, we like to see things in the spatial domain. Of course, we have our linguistic capacity and faculties, but I think the brain tends to be more spatially devised as opposed to parsing through linguistics. Yeah, so it's a little bit inefficient having to use linguistics as a parsing format. Well, it makes sense, right? Because our brains, like we our brains evolved to look at our environment, and our environment happens to be expressing itself through the space-time, essentially. So, obviously, why would we not use that faculty? It's a lot more developed than linguistics, which is why most people actually still have trouble reading and all that, because it takes practice. Like anything else, it's a chunking format. And now I don't want to talk about like the theory of linguistics and how that ties into. Well, I know I like Noam Chomsky. I know a lot of people probably like him. He's really into that. And who was the other guy on linguistics? Bertrand Russell. I think he also was really into that kind of stuff. He was a philosopher. Maybe he was a mathematician. I don't know. So Noam Chomsky was interesting, actually. He studied mathematics first, and then he was like studying higher, like abstract algebra mathematics, and he was like, oh, well, I mean, this is all a language, of course. And I guess he wanted to study linguistics more because it happens to be a more abstracted framework for all possible ways in which you can express thoughts in the brain, which are spatial, of course, and I think there are. I don't think I mean, okay, maybe that's wrong, because I do express my thoughts through verbal expression as well. I kind of felt a combination of the two. I see images and I also talk in my head. Now, that's a good question. I think when I'm thinking deeply about things, I'd rather use a verbal domain, because it's hard to like kind of like, I don't know, like maybe some people think this way, but it may, if you're like extremely spatially intelligent, then maybe you would actually think spatially and then translate it into a verbal communication. I tend to I can use those faculties, but I tend to, maybe this is just how I develop thought, and my thoughts tend to develop from the Socratic method, which uses English as opposed to other frameworks that can be used. Now, I've heard of people, of course, that can actually visualize systems almost vividly, and I can to some degree. I can see connection points, but I wouldn't say it was like actually vivid. Like, yeah. So I'm sure there are a lot of people like that, but yeah, just because of like the variability of the human mind and how it develops and how it can express itself, and of course, genes tend to be different and all that. So I mean, we can talk about that too. But anyways, yeah. So what was I talking about again? Oh yeah, effective field theory. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, it's again, like I said, it gets into quantum field theory and nuclear, atomic, condensed matter, and gravitational physics, and high energy physics, and all that. And I don't want to talk about fluids. I really don't. I mean, again, so fluids, because when you think about fluids, fluids are seen more macroscopically, for the most part. You can think about fluid dynamics, of course, and you have the Navier-Stokes equation for all that stuff, and they tend to visualize fluids through a vector format, so you can, for them. But also there are other ways of doing it, and also we think about superfluids, which is actually naturally microscopic, but it's so to the point where it's like an enmeshment of particles. It just seems like just a stew of energy. So they tend to look at it from a vector point of view as opposed to a field theory point of view. It's still a field theory. It's I guess a quantum field theory point of view from the mechanical wave perspective, and these guys having some form of tension and whatnot. I think. I don't know. Don't ask me. I'm not a physicist. I just happen to be interested in this stuff. Yeah, so I have 2 books that I want to get. Both of them are not in the library. So I'm probably I'd rather own these books. I feel like I'm going to be frequently referencing them. And yeah. How many pages does this book have? Where is, 6. Wow. I like big books. This is 600 pages, 660 pages. I wonder how much. 444 pages. 444. Yeah, so yeah. I think I have a lot of studying to do to keep my mind busy. Oh yeah, I also I also created a reading list through my Chrome browser, and you know how you can actually organize tabs. I made a reading list and I just named it reading, because I want to go through the non-relativistic Dirac equation. I also kind of want to look at how they derive quantum field theory through both paths, because I kind of want to have a good perspective of it and why people have decided to I'm moving my camera a little bit, how they have decided to derive quantum field theory from both the canonical quantization and the path integral formalization. And yeah, I mean, I have an intuitive understanding of the path integral to some extent. It's just a aggregation of worlds and kind of like superimposing all worlds into one, which is the Schrodinger equation. Yeah, because that's of course anyways, I don't know, I don't feel like thinking about or talking about it too much right now, because this video has been going on for a while. It has been going on for a while. It's interesting to think about, though. Of course, you also have to think about these worlds, because, I mean, when you look at it, even in the two-dimensional perspective, like, you have, like, a circulation effect, and, of course, well, this is a stationary point, but when you think about a moving particle, it has a diameter where it's very likely, and then, of course, it's a trough point, and then so the permutation of energy causes it to be less probable for, the further the radius is and whatnot, but it still has a radius in which is likely to happen, which is why we look at dx's and whatnot to see within that, I wouldn't say dx, a very small radius, it can trickle out, and it of course over time it tends to compound quite a bit. So that's why we take a path integral, and then we look at all of these paths. And of course, more paths are going to be more probable than others because you get closer and closer to the diameter, it's more likely. But then, of course, you have to think about the trajectory of the wave. It's most likely going to be along that line of the trajectory of the wave. With the constant velocity, I don't want to think about acceleration right now. But yeah, it still trickles out in all of reality, but certain world states are more likely than others, I guess. World states isn't including time itself, so you can think of like a video or a frame rate or whatever you want to think of it as. But yeah, anyways, yeah, so I'm just intuitively thinking about the path integrals and whatnot, and I think I do have a pretty good idea. That's why they use integrals. Because these are all probabilities, and you're taking integral over all the probabilities and adding up to a singular piece, which will eventually add up to a certain probability for that particular wave state or world state, world line, or whatever. Anyways, there's a particular interpretation. Do they call it a Copenhagen interpretation? I think that's what they call it. It's the different world lines or possible worlds that the universe can take. So, yeah. I'm still. It's been a while since I thought about probability, but it makes sense in my head, and sort of. I mean, like I'm still trying to. I guess yeah. That's actually also a good idea. It's like all possible worlds add up to a 1, and then a path is only a slice of that piece of 1 that has a probability. I guess that's another way to think of it. And the biggest probability is obviously going to be the trajectory of the wave. Now, I had to think about that more. I had another question, but I think I'm going to wait and find answers to that question. I've been thinking about it more. I've been thinking about it as a project-oriented point of view. Like I said before in my other videos, I used to be the kind of guy of, education makes you think otherwise. They think that they know everything more than you, or not necessarily everything more than you. The education system that they like to share information for the students, so they because they think that they know what's best for them to get to a certain point. But I think I've reached a state where I know myself more than what the education system thinks is best for me, and I am a why-oriented person, so I tend to orient my projects out around a particular why. So that's why I typically have a notebook, and I write all my whys down. And each of these whys can be a series of projects, whether it's reading and connecting those readings to a framework that tends to answer those whys pretty well. And eventually it can maybe be derived mathematically. But yeah, that's why I have a series of whys. Of course, these series of whys can answer other whys and all that, and because these answers tend to kind of hit quote unquote two birds with one stone to some degree. So so I just have that's more of a quote unquote project oriented point of view of these kinds of things, is having a series of whys and then doing research pertaining to those whys, and that satisfies a lot of fulfillment within my brain, because now I can understand these things from a why perspective, I guess, as opposed to just going down the standard route of most people. So I think I'm done for now. I've talked quite a bit, and so I guess I'll talk about. I already told you what I'm going to do. A lot of reading, and I'm going to start off with. I'm going to stick with one thing at a time. I'm not going to branch out too quickly. My brain wants to branch out, pretty much. exponentially, but I'm going to try to focus on one thing as opposed to, I already have a bunch of tabs open. How many tabs do I have for reading? Right, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. I have 9 tabs for reading. Of course, I already talked about the Paul Dirac, and then I had another tab. This was a little page, or I think it's a PDF pertaining to the path integral and canonical quantization, and I am also looking at the Pauli exclusion principle, which I just heard of. So I'm looking into that, and then I have like a tab open for the standard model, just because there's a lot of numbers. Numbers are important too, and antimatter, because why not? Even though I kind of understand what antimatter is to a degree, and I have a list of. I also like to list these tabs from priority. I used to from highest priority to least priority. That's usually how I have them. So I have the standard model up here. I also have the the list of Feynman diagrams are important as well, and because these particles do interact, and I was thinking about like the smash shield particles, and there was this guy named Chris Lingen who sees it from a there's like a non-terminal and terminal perspective. Like you could think of like a CPU as the terminal, and then the non-terminal, then the terminal perspective is like somebody looking at the output, which is you're looking at your screen, or if you you move your mouse, and then there's an input which changes the state of the screen, and clicking, and it changes. Just multiple. It's just input output. I'm actually kind of glad I actually read into computation, because it actually helps out with understanding physics more, because I think computation actually tends to flesh out the quote-unquote profundities of the world, where it's not really as profound as people believe it to be, because and also I think the profundities tend to misdirect people, even professionals, to some degree. So I actually am glad that I have studied computers to some degree. I wouldn't say that I would want to be a software engineer, because there are multiple reasons. I just don't like software engineering much. Although I did run to a software engineer yesterday, and I think most of it, I don't know. I just don't like software engineering. It just seems I don't like to downplay it, because it is important in this world, but I find it to be not that exciting. I find exploring and putting the pieces together of like how reality actually functions to be a lot more interesting. But yeah, anyways, yeah. So like, I also have Larmor precession still that I'm looking at, and I have Maxwell's equations, because why not? And I was talking about the Huygens-Fresnel principle without even realizing I was talking about it, but it just kind of this is also used from the Feynman's path integral, also kind of utilizes the Huygens-Fresnel principle. I don't know if Feynman actually realized he was using it, but he was, by thinking about a wavefront as a series of little wavelets. I think Feynman may have noticed that. I don't know. I haven't done much reading on Feynman, but although there are a lot of Feynman lectures, there's 3 volumes pertaining to that, which I never read because I was impatient. So that's why we have the internet. It tends to work with my brain pretty well, because again, my brain is not linear, so I can utilize the non-linearity of the internet as well to then resonate with my mind more, I guess would be a good way to say it. So anyways, so I think I'm done talking. I hope you guys have a wonderful day. Bye.